Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Dr. Andrew Kavanagh, and I've decided to create this video in response to some of the presentations of the IKEA in India group. As the Chief Examiner for Business Strategy 2017 Semester 2, it's my job to inform the cohort as to what they should have actually presented and the information that should have actually been expressed within their presentation. So without further ado, let's address the questions that were given to the groups on the IKEA in India case. So the first question that was given was, does IKEA have a sustainable source of competitive advantage? So to determine whether or not IKEA has a sustainable source of competitive advantage, what groups should have done to understand the basis of the resource-based view would have been to explore the Barney 1991 literature, which actually explains the model and how it revolves around the two main notions. Firstly being that resources and capabilities differ between firms, and secondly, they are in fact immobile, meaning that firms cannot imitate competitors' resources and capabilities and implement the same strategy as one another. So what we're actually going to use is the VRIN model, the valuable, the rare, the inimitable, and the non-substitutable framework, which will determine whether or not the capability is a source of sustainable competitive advantage or not. So what the best groups actually did was they picked a couple of core capabilities and they went through this VRIN model to sort of work out whether IKEA in fact had a source of sustainable competitive advantage or not. So as an example, I've just gone through and I've picked two random capabilities and gone through that model. So the capabilities which we'll explore for the purposes of explaining manufacturing and marketing. So we'll start with manufacturing. So first off, is IKEA's manufacturing considered valuable? So through my analysis, we would say that yes, I would say it would be valuable because products are designed in a way so that they can be flat packed, which gives value to the customer because they can easily transport the product at a lower cost. Therefore, valuable manufacturing process. Is it rare? The way products are manufactured would be rare in India because usually furniture is created by hand by local craftsmen and carpenters. So yes, rare manufacturing. Is IKEA's manufacturing inimitable? We would say no, it's not inimitable because it can actually be copied. It would be expensive for a firm or a rival to do so. However, inimitable? Probably not. Is IKEA's manufacturing non-substitutable? Well, manufacturing would not be a valid source of sustainable competitive advantage based on this fact because there are obviously substitutes to the manufacturing process, i.e. what is already being done in India. So that would be this strategy here, or the manufacturing strategy. Now let's look at the marketing strategy. So first off, is IKEA's marketing strategy considered valuable? We would say IKEA's certainly uses a valuable source of marketing strategy. IKEA actually recently used the hype of Game of Thrones, in fact, to their advantage by giving customers instructions on how to create a garment out of an IKEA rug, as famously worn by popular character Jon Snow, played of course by Kit Harington. The campaign actually reached 151 million internet users and searches for Scald Rug increased by 775%. Is IKEA's marketing rare? We would say yes. IKEA is quite intelligent and forward-thinking with their marketing. They know how to construct effective marketing campaigns to target different demographics. This is actually exemplified by another video that was posted to YouTube. IKEA actually created this video based around the ASMR trend. ASMR meaning autonomous sensory meridian response. They're those weird sounding videos where there's weird rustling of sheets, people making weird things with weird noises and sensory stimulus using IKEA products. This actually generated 286,000 views in 3 weeks. So marketing, rare? Yes. Is IKEA's marketing considered inimitable? So IKEA's marketing strategy would be pretty hard to copy based on our analysis because they're very reactive to current and also future trends. They're able to use humour, satire. In fact, the luxury French label Balenciaga recently released a blue bag retailing for €2,000. It looked awfully similar to IKEA's famous blue bag. IKEA very humorously was quick to respond with this. So would IKEA's marketing be non-substitutable? IKEA's marketing strategy is non-substitutable as there's no strategic equivalent based on our analysis to what IKEA are doing. Therefore, our analysis says that IKEA would have a sustainable competitive advantage within their marketing strategy. So the second question was, what are the principal industry characteristics in which IKEA operate? So we've actually decided to explore this question using Porter's 5 forces model. So this uses rivalry amongst existing competitors, threat of new entrants, bargaining power of buyers, bargaining power of suppliers, and then of course the threat of substitutes. So we'll go through each of these and try and work out the principal industry characteristics based on this model. So whilst there are hundreds, if not thousands, of small furniture makers creating custom-made furniture for households in India, there is no current singular player in the Indian market IKEA would be concerned about. However, as a collective, these small furniture producers represent a difference in consumer demand unique to the Indian furniture landscape that currently favours handcrafted, unique designs IKEA is simply unable to produce. So as far as rivalry among existing competitors, if we were to narrowly define the market to major producers of discount furniture in India, there is little to no rivalry currently because due to the case, as we read, 85% of the market is currently dominated by these small, disorganized producers. So we would say there's low rivalry among existing producers. So threat of new entrants. There's been a surge of imported furniture from Italy, Germany, South Korea, and Japan. However, none of these entrants represent a threat to IKEA, which competes in a pretty different price bracket to most other imported brands. The threat of new entrants competing with the scale of IKEA in India would also be considered low. Bargaining power of buyers. So whilst consumers have access to many alternatives in the Indian furniture market, buyers individually have little to no bargaining power in the Indian furniture retail landscape. So as a result of that, we would say there'd be low bargaining of buyers. It's funny, a lot of students would actually say, and did say, that it was high. Forgetting about this is about individual buyers, not necessarily conglomerates who don't necessarily have high levels of bargaining power. Bargaining power of suppliers. So with government regulations on FDIs in India stipulating foreign companies are to mandatorily source 30% of goods from India's micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, this threat has actually decreased somewhat. Whilst dealing with such a high volume of SMESs, this may cause supply chain inconsistencies and other bottleneck headaches for IKEA. The issue of suppliers having power of IKEA is actually reduced due to each singular local supplier actually being inconsequential. What this means is that if there's a supplier that's actually causing problems to IKEA, all they actually have to do, cut them off. They don't have to worry about them. It wouldn't actually make a difference to IKEA's bottom line. And then, of course, the threat of substitutes. Now, no realistic substitute for furniture exists. So therefore, that substitute threat would be low. However, depends how, again, you decide to define the market. We've actually decided to define the market with, as far as high-yielding, low-cost producers. Therefore, low threat of substitutes to a something the size and scale of IKEA. Perform a SWOT analysis on IKEA. So of course, a SWOT analysis goes through the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that exist in regards to IKEA's expansion. So what the best groups actually did was they picked a couple of the major strengths, couple of major weaknesses, one or two opportunities and threats, went through each of these. So as an example, what we'll do is we'll go through a major strength. So IKEA's most dominant strength when it comes to foreign expansion would have to simply be its experience in the field. IKEA has operated in 41 different countries worldwide, whopping $24 billion in global sales in 2012. These things don't just happen overnight. And due to IKEA's experience going and rolling out into countries close by, Norway, Denmark in 1963, 69 respectively, and then rolling out into North America in 1996, where they've opened up 26 stores. They haven't actually had it easy the whole way. Initially, when they rolled out into America, they did face some troubles and some setbacks, but they were able to pivot and respond to these setbacks quite well. For example, in the US, they had to increase the size of their furniture due to larger people, larger expectations when it comes to furniture. So IKEA has been shown that it can pivot and change based on changing demands in different global markets. So that would be a definite strength. A weakness? Unfortunately, IKEA's renowned big box stores don't always succeed. Analysis have attributed their failure to China, for example, for the difference in culture. Although popular with high sales in China, there are actually many subcategories of demographics in the largely populated country that avoid the DIY megastore mantra. So retailers like IKEA can often slip up when they underestimate the complexity of nations like China. For instance, in the past 15 years, China's home ownership has skyrocketed from close to 0% to nearly 70%. Yet, many people still don't know how to set up tables, curtains, and other complicated homewares. Many people also live in condos with smaller housing, so very similar to India. So as a result, IKEA have needed to restructure their superstores to accommodate more staff to assist rather than to sell. So in contention to the weakness, that'd be the fact that one size does not necessarily fit all. Showrooms and samples must be smaller, especially in the Indian regions where small apartments dominate. Known for their low prices, yet emerging into a market where this is the norm, they'll be targeting the growing working class. This is not such a situation in Western countries, where the demographics of consumers is broad. But for India, they'll need to re-innovate their products to suit those of Indian people, just like they had to in China to suit the housing and demographics of the nation. If improved, IKEA could dominate the Indian market. So some opportunities that exist. So while consumers in India traditionally tend to favour old-style, handmade furniture from markets, there's actually huge potential for IKEA in the younger, emerging demographic that's expanding rapidly in both size and their purchasing power. Coming into the major cities, high rates of university education have pretty much led to a huge exodus of young adults moving to India's cities in search of employment. There's an obvious benefit of targeting this market due to the increased wealth. The real potential for IKEA lies in the different worldview they come to hold. So what's really happening is IKEA can really use this emerging group to target their goods to, who really seem to have a more worldly concept of what it means to be successful. Therefore, they're going to go out and seek to buy goods that IKEA is selling, which should certainly represent an opportunity. So the major threat that exists would be corruption and government. India has a very high level of corruption than most of the countries IKEA is already operating in. So the company's pretty strong stance against bribes is actually due to inhibit their plans for further expansion. It took them decades to overcome heavy restrictions on foreign investment imposed by the federal government. But one of the bigger factors in the future will be the purchase of real estate for new stores. Should the stores require land that is controlled by local government, there may be difficulty in acquiring said land or permits from members who are actually they're used to receiving kickbacks for their cooperation to, I guess, keep the wheels in motion, as we'll say. IKEA's already faced such difficulties in Russia, where expansion's been allegedly hindered due to a refusal to actually bribe officials for permits. So the last question was, what international strategy have IKEA adopted in India? And we've actually, based on our analysis, would say it would be a transnational strategy. So key here is IKEA's need to maintain their overarching vision and branding. So there are elements of the IKEA experience that are non-negotiable, largely focused around the customer experience of exploring the store, seeing items in the preset showrooms, and the use of cafes, restaurants, and food to make IKEA more of a day out than the typical shopping experience that customers would be used to. As such, these elements must remain the purview of the international headquarters, set and maintained in accordance with the company's stores worldwide. Other areas, however, need to be more flexible in order to match the specific needs of the Indian market. The most vital area from this perspective is the product range offered at stores. Indian consumers have completely different living situations to consumers in Western countries. And a lot of work is actually being done, going into people's homes, identifying their needs, their wants, what's best suited for the sale, or what's best suited for sale in India, rather. And the responsibility for continuing this research, maintaining the product line that they'll need to fall to the Indian units to ensure that decisions are being made in line with actual customer needs. Other areas that will be adjusted to local preferences will include the type of food offered in the in-store restaurants, the HR policies for the stores. India's an enormous potential number of retail employees due to its massive population, but the difference in retail expectations compared to Western stores will actually require extensive selection and training to ensure that the cultural gap doesn't lead to customer confusion or staff falling back on their prior experience of highly personalized service. So the reason why we haven't said India and IKEA should use a global strategy. IKEA's earliest expansions outside of Europe attempted a global strategy, whereby they effectively repeated. They used an identical model used in Sweden and planted it directly onto other continents. Its first failure was actually in 1974 when it entered Japan, where even their local partners at the time did not believe that the stores could be a success. They quickly found that consumers did not have much of a use for their furniture, which was often too large to fit comfortably in the smaller apartments Japanese people traditionally were living in. Additionally, they didn't have the resources to transport their purchases home, as the Japanese tended to drive smaller cars than their European counterparts. This initial expansion was unsuccessful, folding in 1986. But provided a very valuable learning tool for re-entry almost 20 years later. In the USA, IKEA suffered from the opposite problem with its product range. While access to cars was not an issue, Americans found the furniture on offer to be smaller than what they were used to. Bed frames didn't suit the mattresses they owned, kitchen cabinets were too small to store larger American dinner plates. So as a result, we had the same problems. Upon re-entry to Japan, IKEA took lessons from the USA expansion and offered a product range that was accustomed and customized to suit the Japanese home. In addition, they offered a more accessible delivery service to accommodate buyers without ready access to vehicles. These stores were far more successful than the initial entrants, and the similarity of consumer needs provided a useful blueprint for the Indian expansion. So as a result, we would very much advocate for a transnational rollout rather than a global one-size-fits-all model. So on behalf of myself, Andy Kavanagh, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I hope the students got something, I hope you all got something out of this, and wishing you the best of luck in your days moving forward. So thank you. Oh, this is very embarrassing. I have not turned this off. Excuse me.